Are we ready to start? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Kristen told me I have to follow my notes, not to speak anything else. It says introduce myself, so I will introduce myself. Commissioner Roger Perino from Dishes. I want to thank everyone for being here today. And we'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. General, if you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Today we have Cathy Calhoun, Director of State Ops, and Richard White, Deputy Secretary of Public Safety. Thank you both for attending. We appreciate it, and we'll be hearing from both of them shortly. I would like to thank again everyone else for attending. As you know that we're supposed to meet twice annually, and last year I did not make it because I was testifying to get my job. And fortunately or unfortunately, I got it. So anyway, I'm proud that we all work together and get things done for the last year. For me, it was a very exciting year to see things happen, especially for the first time. And all of you have been very, very good and important partners. I like General Sherman, who's the Vice Chair, if he has anything to add.
No, I'll be good. I'll talk along the way here.
Okay.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
Going right. Oh, you said you had to go.
Well, I plan to be short and sweet, but you beat me on that one. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. As you know, this is my first DPC meeting in this role. I have attended in the past in my capacity at the Department of Transportation. But as we look around the table, we see a lot of the faces are the same, but the name tags in front of us have changed. So those of you that have also shifted around, thank you. I just want to take a moment, first and foremost, on behalf of the governor to say thank you. He actually recently asked me about this committee and when the next meeting was, so he's glad to hear that we are, in fact, doing these meetings regularly and that Commissioner Perino has taken the lead on these meetings again. You know, as we go forward, you all have been in touch. There's been a significant amount of response, whether it be snow, ice jams, wind, rain, building collapses as recently as this week, bathrooms fouling at airports and porta-johns getting delivered. So everything that we do, you know, some of it makes the press, some of it doesn't, but everything that we do touches the lives of New Yorkers, and I just want to say thank you. The way we respond is certainly much more aggressive than maybe in the past. So thank you for being creative. Thank you for putting, you know, leaning forward and using the resources of your agency, not only your actual assets, but your personnel and your creativity and your thought process. I believe that, you know, a decade ago, the answer was always, no, that's not our job. And now our answer is, yes, that is our job, and how else can we help you? I think that credit goes to Commissioner Perino, to Kevin Wisely at OEM. You guys are amazing too. Where is Kevin? He's around here somewhere. You guys are amazing. Your leadership is amazing. Terry O'Leary, you've been wonderful to work with, so thank you. Pulling together the emergency response playbook. I believe most of your agencies have it. We are implementing those procedures. It is a living, breathing document, always looking for suggestions on how to tweak and do better. But again, I just simply want to say, you know, having sat in that chair as Department of Transportation, and now in this chair. It is an honor and a privilege to work with each and every one of you, and I will say the staff that goes out there and responds is absolutely amazing. So thank you for all you have done. Thank you for all you will do. And if everybody could just pray to whatever higher being they have that we don't get hit with hurricanes or any more tornadoes or any other natural disaster for the next, I don't know, year or two, that'd be awesome. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Richard?
Sure.
Oh, and Richard's done a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, boss. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here as well. It is my first time as well. I have the privilege of following my boss, so the first 2 pages of my remarks, I don't have to say because she said them. But I think it's testament to what you're seeing now, a change at the top, is that our Director of State Ops is a person who's out there. You've seen her, you've seen myself, you've seen the commissioners, and I think that that's making a big difference. Trust me, we see it that, and specifically Cathy sees it, that when we have these disasters, the fact that you all as leaders of your agencies are out there specifically feeding us information. You know, I know we hear from Matt, we hear from the general, we hear from everybody else. You know, I talk to Superintendent Beach more than I talk to my wife. You know, sometimes we just whisper to each other late at night, but we are there, and that is making a difference. I can't recall, this is my 30th year in government between the city and state, where you're going to see this many commissioners and your staff out there responding. Even at the most recent building collapse, you had Cathy there, you had a variety of other people reporting back to the governor. That is not lost. That level of response, the quality of what we're doing out there, and the way we're handling these specific situations, at least in the last few years, has been a significant change. It's a change for the better, and I think you're beginning to see that the public is beginning to appreciate it. I've had the pleasure of being out there now for the last 6 months, to being at tornadoes, being snowed in emergency operation centers where we couldn't go home, and then seeing those counties and those cities and those residents personally reach back to us with their level of appreciation. And then that's a testament to the work that you all do, and I applaud you for that. One thing I would emphasize is that as we're looking forward to the next level of extreme weather, as we know that it's going to come, whether it's man-made or natural, we'd ask for all of you to continue to think of ways that we can get out ahead of this. That's something that we get called upon on a regular basis. We hear it from the top down, whether it's the governor, whether it's Cathy, whether it's you all, to think of proactive ways we can get out ahead of it. And more importantly, if you all have a success story or process or procedure that you're using that worked well, that was something that really alleviated other issues, we'd ask you to think about incorporating them for the next meeting, sharing them with your colleagues, because I think what this particular group of individuals do is incredibly helpful. It saves lives, and we're coming to a point where clearly it's appreciated, not only through the chamber, through your staff, but more importantly, the people of the state of New York. So I thank you for having me here. I really appreciate what you do, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for your comments. Cathy, I want to thank you for pointing out myself and Kevin and Terry, but we're not successful without the partnership here, and we're not successful without our leaders in dishes. So if I can have any dishes employees stand up just for a moment to be recognized. Thank you very much. We're going to hear about disaster declaration procedures from Lisa Tomko, my general counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We thought we would touch upon disaster declaration procedures as you're actively engaged in response activities and operations. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. The majority of the representatives here today on the DPC are commissioners and executives. You're all familiar with the process for requesting and providing assistance and support during disasters. You know to contact OEM or to put requests through New York Response when you can provide or need resources, such as generators, light towers, sandbags. What you may not know about is what goes into a disaster declaration, also known as a declaration of a state disaster emergency. The legal authority for the governor to declare a disaster emergency is Executive Law, Article 2B. Whenever the governor, upon his own initiative or upon a request from one or more chief executives, county, city, town, or village, finds that a disaster has occurred or may be imminent, and the local governments are unable to adequately respond, the governor shall declare a state disaster emergency. This declaration is done by an executive order. That's the mechanism for the governor to declare a state disaster. The executive orders must include a description of the disaster, the areas affected, but the executive order may, and this is important for you all to know, direct state agencies to aid local governments. And that includes using, lending, giving equipment, supplies, facilities, services, and resources of state personnel. The executive order may also temporarily suspend or modify state laws, rules, and regulations necessary to safeguard the health and welfare of the public. These suspensions must be reasonably necessary for the disaster response efforts of the state. DHSES serves as the operational arm of the DPC, and as part of that responsibility, when a disaster occurs or is imminent, we put together a draft executive order for the governor's review, consideration, and action. DHSES identifies the information related to the emergency incident, the counties affected or anticipated to be affected, those state agencies and authorities that are likely to be involved and directed to assist, and the laws, rules, and regulations that need to be suspended or modified. So as counsel for DHSES, that's where the counsel's office gets involved. While most of you have been involved in responding and supporting the state's response to disasters, please know that your councils also have a vital role in this process. Your agency councils are critical in identifying those laws that prevent, hinder, or delay the state's response efforts. Your councils recommend suspensions and modifications of laws, rules, and regulations to allow the state to effectively and efficiently respond to the needs of the state and its local governments. A few examples. OCA recently identified the need to modify a law to extend filing deadlines due to impassable roads. Tax and Finance identified the need to allow extensions to pay property taxes. DOH identified the need to suspend the public health law provisions related to filling and picking up prescriptions at certain pharmacies because other pharmacies were closed directly related to the emergency incident. And we were talking about snow in this case. The executive order process moves quickly, and your council's responsiveness and ability to provide advice and guidance in his or her respective area is necessary, and it's relied upon. You and your councils are the subject matter experts. Your active engagement and support in the executive order process is appreciated. So we're not going to get into the intricacies here today, but please communicate to your councils and know that DHSES Counsel's Office is here to support you. Should you have any questions, contact us, or you can contact OEM for further information or guidance, or if you need specific information related to this. It's important, and we appreciate your involvement and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. That was a whole lot clearer than when you're trying to explain it to me at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm half asleep. The next topic is going to be the 2018 hurricane season outlook. Steve Rizzo, warning coordination, meteorologist, National Weather Service, Albany. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully we don't see any of these this year. We didn't last year, and that's a good thing. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist in the Albany office here. There's 5 offices that cover New York, which most of you know. So this is what I'm going to talk about this morning. Quick look at the summer temperature and precipitation outlook. Last year, the hurricane season review, we had a very active year last year. Hopefully this year is not so active. The May Atlantic hurricane outlook, which will be updated in August. Some hurricane and tropical storm information, and just some places to find additional information and coursework if you want to study a little more. Temperature outlook for the remainder of the summer. This is for June, July, and August. They're talking about above normal temperatures for the Northeast, most of the country really. And precipitation supposed to be wetter than normal. However, New York's for the last couple months has been on the coolish, dryish side, especially upstate. In fact, the next drought monitor that's going to be issued this Thursday, most of upstate New York will be in the initial stages of drought. So that's more of a problem right now than wetness. Downstate, it's not quite as bad, but upstate is pretty dry. So I'll be looking for that on Thursday, and hopefully it'll rain this weekend. The tropical storms and the hurricanes from last year, just a recap, a summary. Quite a bit of strong hurricane activity last year. Maria, Harvey, Irma. Puerto Rico was devastated. Remember the flooding in Houston last year. Florida, the Upper Keys took a big hit. Hurricanes usually form in what they call the main development region, which is down in the southern Atlantic, and move westward before recurving to the north. And if you look back at the history of all the tropical storms and hurricanes since 1851 in the Atlantic, there you go. You can see there's, it's a pretty typical pattern. Not all of them hit the United States, thankfully. In fact, a very small percentage, probably 30% or less. Okay, so moving on to this year's outlook. It's a product of the Climate Prediction Center, the National Hurricane Center in Miami, and the Hurricane Research Division. And they started this in 1998. And again, this outlook will be updated in August, as the peak of the hurricane season is in September, and it really ramps up in August. So at the beginning of the real season, they issue another outlook. So from last year, there were 17 named storms, the normal's 12, 10 hurricanes, 6 major hurricanes, quite a few landfalls in the United States, and additionally, obviously, Puerto Rico was hit with a major hurricane. For this year, slightly above normal. The normal's 12. The median there would be 13, just above normal for named storms. For hurricanes, 7 or 8, and major hurricanes, 2 would be in the middle there, and 3 is normal. So roughly a normal, maybe slightly above normal season. To put that in perspective, this goes back to 1950, and this is just a weird term as far as they call this the accumulated cyclone energy, but the graph kind of shows the active periods and the inactive periods. From 1950 to about 1970 or so was a very active period. From 1970 to 1995 was an inactive period. We're in an active period again of hurricane activity, and maybe for another 5 or so years if it's a 25-year cycle. So for the forecast this year, what they're basing their forecast on, the ENSO, the El Nino and La Nina, they expect it to be neutral this year. El Nino suppresses hurricanes, so if we went into a weak El Nino, that would be a good thing. We'd have fewer hurricanes probably. The problem is that they've been forecasting us, and I'll show an example, they've been forecasting us to go into El Nino for the past few years, and it hasn't happened. But the sea surface temperatures are near normal. They're not way above normal or anything. And the wind shear is relatively weak this year. At least they're expecting that, so near normal seems reasonable. One of the problems they've had over the past few years is they keep above the 0 line there is El Nino, and these are from all the worldwide global forecast, weather forecast models. They've been trying to forecast El Nino for the past 2 years, and it hasn't happened. We've gone into La Nina each summer, and La Nina enhances hurricane activity. So hopefully the models are right this year, and we do go into El Nino because it'll weaken the hurricanes, but they haven't gotten it right the last couple of years. So probabilistic way of looking at things, near normal 40%, above normal 35%, and then 25% chance below normal. So near to above normal is probably where we're at this year. Tropical cyclone names. There was one tropical cyclone already. Alberto, Memorial Day weekend, affected the Gulf Coast, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama. So those are the names for this year. And a reminder that the season really starts to ramp up usually. Any month of the year you can get a hurricane or a tropical storm, but the season really ramps up around the 1st of August and lingers through October. And then after that it's pretty much done, with the worst of it August, September, October. Another reminder that the categories for the hurricanes are based on wind speed. They're not based on anything else. So you can have a very, relatively weak hurricane that causes a lot of rain and causes a lot of flooding, even though it doesn't have a lot of wind. You can have a tropical storm that causes a lot of flooding, even though it doesn't have a lot of wind. So anyway, with tropical storms and hurricanes, flooding is often the biggest problem. If you look at tropical cyclone fatalities, storm surge, rainfall-induced flooding, and surf, so 80% of fatalities from tropical storms and hurricanes are flood-related. So since we've been talking about flooding, just a reminder that there are public products out there that talk about flooding. There's days 1 through 3, the excessive rainfall outlooks for the whole United States. So this is a way to kind of zero in on where the heavy rain is expected. And then they also now, for the Department of Transportation and the thruway folks, this may be important, these extreme precipitation monitors, they look at average recurrence intervals. So a lot of this infrastructure is designed based on recurrence intervals. And so you can see if there's a heavy rain forecast, you can see how it fits in, whether it's a 2-year rainfall, 5-year rainfall. If you get up to a 100-year rainfall amount, you're probably going to see some infrastructure damage. So you don't want to see that. Reminder, the Hurricane Center, they produce the hurricane forecast, or the ones who monitor the forecast tracks. They task the hurricane hunters to go out and fly into the storms. Some products from last year that we didn't get to use from the Hurricane Center, which means we didn't have the hurricanes affect us. The potential storm surge flooding map. And this reminder, this does extend up the Hudson River through Orange and Putnam counties. And then the storm surge watches and warnings that go along with this. For the flooding maps, they show the inundation above ground level in feet. So an example, the upper right example there, the map is for the New York City area, and the yellow, orange, and red would be inundation above ground level above 3 feet. So that would trigger the storm surge watches and warnings. And these are reasonable worst case scenario. They're basically saying that there's only a 10% chance that these levels will be exceeded. Not everybody's going to see flooding in those areas, but somebody is likely to see a level of inundation equal to that amount. And the storm surge watch and warnings will go along with that inundation, again, 3 feet or more. Some different products for this year that are added on to that. The hurricane public advisory used to go through 48 hours. They're going to go out through 3 days now, so that's 72 hours. The wind forecast will go out 48 hours. They used to only go out 36 hours for the hurricane wind forecast. They've got the arrival time of tropical storm force wind graphics. I have an example of those. The annual update to the track forecast error cone. The errors keep getting smaller, but there are still errors. And the public advisories, when they hand them off to the Weather Prediction Center, will be in the same format in both cases. And more information can be found in the links. So the time of arrival of the tropical storm force winds, there are 2 types. There's the earliest reasonable time of arrival, and then there's a most likely time of arrival. The earliest reasonable time is probably the time you want to have preparations completed. Any kind of pre-storm preparations should be done probably. And the most likely time is just what it says, the most likely time. But the storm could be faster, it could slow down. So, the annual update to the forecast error cone. The cone shrunk somewhat, but there are always caveats to this. A reminder that the cone does not talk about the size of the storm. It just gives you the probable track of the center of the storm. So the center of the storm should track within that cone 2/3 of the time, but that means 1/3 of the time, based on the error statistics, the storm will move outside the cone. It's not an exact science. Their error statistics are based on the last 5 years, in this case 2013 through 2017. And just just a reminder that you really need to keep an eye on the size of the storm, the wind field in the storm, more so than just the cone itself. Enhanced messaging will continue this year. They will be putting out these key message statements. They will put them out on social media, put them out to the public. We will repost and retweet these from our offices as well. So everybody's singing off the same sheet of music, so to speak. I know some people, especially coastal counties, there are probably folks who have taken some of the hurricane readiness courses. There's a short course that's out there. It's a one-day course that the Hurricane Center teaches. All the presentations are available online at the Hurricane Center's webpage, and I put the link on there to make the presentation available afterwards. People can get there if you want to look at more information about hurricanes and all the products that the Hurricane Center issues. The HURVAC program has been updated again for this year. There's a 2018 version. And what is it? It's the storm tracking decision support tool, basically used for situational awareness and EOCs. Program access is restricted to officials in government emergency management. Registration required, but the program is free, and the latest version was just updated this month on June 4th. This is what HURVAC does, a useful tool again in EOCs for monitoring storms, storm track, flooding from storms, potential flooding. And it can be set up to update and report on communities' evacuation start times or last possible evacuation times. There's a new web-based version of this coming out, and in fact there's a webinar this afternoon at 2 o'clock if anybody's interested in watching it on this new version. They're going to have a webinar to talk about it. So the links to the webinar are up there and the phone number to dial in. And the contact information. A couple changes since last year. Judy Levan used to be my counterpart in Buffalo. She's now the meteorologist in charge in Buffalo. Mike Fries took over as the warning coordination meteorologist. And for those of you who knew Gary Conti at the Upton office on Long Island, Gary retired, I think, in January. And his replacement is Nelson Vaz. He just took over last week. And that's all I have. Are there any questions? All right, none heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before our next presenter, if we could just take a moment to go around the room and introduce ourselves to your agency and your position, please.
Richard Jarris, Red Cross.
Lynn McLaughlin, Department of Labor.
Ed Hamilton, Empire State Development.
Good morning, Jennifer Trodden, New York State Ag and Markets.
Tom Lucas, representing Maria Vullo, Superintendent of Financial Services.
David Kislowski, ITS.
Moira Tashton, the Office of Mental Health.
Stephen Taylor, Office of Children and Family Services.
Don Hughes, OPWDD.
Annette Chesser, OTDA.
John Watson, Office of Victim Services.
John Cochran, New York State Office for the Aging.
Howard Zucker, Department of Health.
Tony Annucci, DOCS.
Todd Murray, DCJS.
Roanne DeStito, Office of General Services.
George Beach, State Police.
Roger Perino, Commissioner of Dishes.
Tony German, the Adjutant General.
Kathy Calhoun, Director of State Operations.
Richard White, Deputy Secretary of Public Safety.
Matt Driscoll, Thruway Authority.
Bob Martins, DOT.
Francis Ernie, Office of Fire Prevention and Control.
Owen Monahan, MTA, Chief of Police.
Jerry McCarty, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Mark Toledo, Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation.
Good morning, Matt Franklin with the New York State DEC.
John Williams, NYSERDA.
Mike Wharton, Public Service Commission.
Eric Bradshaw, Department of State.
Sharon Cates Williams, New York State Education Department.
Tony Papicelli, Homes and Community Renewal.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Our next presentation will be State Coastal Storm Preparedness. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Kagan, Jr., U.S. Air Force, Deputy Director, DMNA.
Hi, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Keegan. I'm the Deputy J3 for Civil Support Operations for the Department of Military and Naval Affairs. Just want to thank Kevin Wisely for asking us to come here. Usually we just listen, but this year, hopefully, we can give you a little bit of insight as to how the New York National Guard trains, plans, and equips our soldiers and airmen to go out there and do civil support operations, in this case, for a large-scale disaster. Our mission: New York military forces are organized, postured, and prepared to conduct civil support operations in multiple joint operational areas, supporting federal, state, and local responders in response to an imminent coastal storm in order to save lives, mitigate human suffering, and protect property. The last sentence is the most important. Our whole drive, our whole purpose is to save lives, mitigate human suffering, and protect property. How do we do this? How do we go about conducting operations in order to execute that? Well, it all starts with our soldiers and airmen. Every day we communicate with the forces that are out in the field to ensure that everybody is completing training and what we call PMCSing, or taking all their vehicles that are going to be used in response and making sure that they're ready to support local responders. Information flow is key here. So what we've done over the last year in response to the governor's economic zones is we've appointed a primary and a backup LNO for each of those zones that are going to be called upon when the time comes when there is a disaster. I just want to do a quick recap of 2017. As Director Calhoun mentioned, it was a busy year. New York military forces conducted around 9 what we would call large-scale events. This is separate than the things that we do every day, but large-scale events. And as you can see, the total was 3,800 service members. So you had 3,800 airmen, Army, New York Guard, and Naval Militia for New York State, all participating in responses. It kicked off with the inauguration with 317 members, and it went all the way down to the most recent, which was the Mid-Hudson power outages of 2018. And as you can see, the largest was Harvey, Maria, and Irma. We had over 1,400 service members in support of that operation. New York State is one of the first, and we come in heavy with assistance to other states as well as our own state. And who did we support? We supported District of Columbia, Texas, Puerto Rico, the United States Virgin Islands, among others. This is what our state active duty has looked like over the last 10 years. And where do you see the trend going? State active duty has gone up, and you can see the large spike being hurricanes. But as you move from left to right, even on a daily basis, our state active duty numbers are going up. That means we're doing more missions on a daily basis. 2018, what has changed? Not a lot, thankfully. What would change New York State military forces' ability to respond? A federal activation, war, right. So we don't foresee any of that, hopefully in 2018. So we don't have a ton of changes. Our numbers are about the same as last year. How many New York State military forces are ready to respond to an event? Right around 4,400. Right around 4,400 folks. That's how many can come in before a hurricane to assist. Now, how are we broken out? I want to point out the dual status commander on this, that's the DSC. They would be in charge of the actual forces going into the response. That's going to be in Troy, New York. And our headquarters element, which is going to be in Latham at DM&A. This is how we backwards plan for a major disaster. This is what we think it's going to look like. Does it always look like this? No. It's just like ICS. It's a framework. We're going to change it as we go forward. It's going to be dynamic. But this is how we think a large-scale disaster is going to look. This is how we actually take our forces and deploy them into the field. The top third of this is our leadership element. And as you can see, it's a 5-day notification window before landfall that a hurricane or a coastal storm is going to hit that we would need to get these forces properly put in place. The middle third, that's our logistics section. Everything revolves around logistics. How do we get trucks, vehicles, people pre-staged into the right areas at the right time? And obviously we don't want to put them in any cone of uncertainty. We want to put them where they can respond, but we don't want to put the forces in danger. The last third, those are the actual response forces. And as you can see, those are put on alert 4 days out, and they're ready to complete missions within 1 day, within 24 hours of landfall. And one thing to remember, who are our response forces? They're all National Guardsmen. Are they full-time? Most of them aren't. 90% of them are going to be firemen, police, teachers, regular jobs. That's why the notification timeline is critical. They need to inform their civilian employers that they're going to be leaving and supporting New York State. Any questions? That's what 2018 looks like. My contact information is up here. If you want to come into the JOC, take a visit, we can take you around and actually show you what day-to-day operations look like in the New York National Guard. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. So truly in emergencies, the National Guard is the boots on the ground, the muscle that gets us things done. So that was an excellent presentation and very important for us to know. State Hurricane Preparedness is going to be from the Master of Disaster, Kevin Wisely, Director of State OEM.
One of these days I'm going to come and just talk about baseball and not about doom and gloom. I'm sure we were all happy that we finally got out of our 120 days of January that we had this year. However, that helped us in the long run, and we went right from winter to summer, and we missed the spring flooding season, so that was good. So I'm going to talk a little bit, kind of recap some of what Steve articulated to us about the hurricane season outlook, some of our preparedness. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel, for the presentation on the National Guard's resources that we have available to us on a daily basis throughout these types of events, whether it be a man-made no-notice event or a man-made notice event or a natural disaster in our communities. So just as a recap, the typical season of hurricanes, June 1st and November 30th. However, we've already seen our first named storm of the year on 28 May that impacted the Florida Panhandle, started off the Yucatan Peninsula and went up through the Gulf of Mexico. We also saw back years ago the impacts of Sandy, which made landfall at the end of the season. The takeaway here is no matter what forecast we have, what the season is, the impacts could be at any time, and all it takes is one. And although there's a season, they could happen before the season, they can happen after the season. It's an ongoing process that we continue to evaluate and manage. The typical season in the Atlantic Basin, 12 named storms, of which 6 are hurricanes, and of those 6, 3 are typically major hurricanes, which is a Category 3 hurricane or greater, and we saw the impacts of those in Steve's slide and what those represent. Steve talked about the probabilistic forecast for this year, 10 to 16 named storms, 6 to 9 could become hurricanes, 1 to 4 could become major hurricanes. Again, the takeaway to remember is that all it takes is one of those Atlantic Basin systems to come up the Atlantic coast and impact us in the state of New York, or travel up through the Gulf and make its way continuously through the east coast of the United States and impact us as we've had from storms in the past. So we're always prepping, we're always talking about it. 2017 was a devastating and historic season when it comes to hurricanes. Steve showed us the past in the slides. This is just another depiction. 10 storms became hurricanes. Out of those 17 named storms this past year, 6 of those were major hurricanes. That's pretty significant. That's a devastating season. Not only did we see great impacts across the eastern part of the United States and the territories in the Caribbean, we also deployed a lot of our resources. As Lieutenant Colonel Keegan was mentioning, the National Guard was deployed in numerous locations. Our Office of Fire Prevention and Controls Task Force 2 was deployed down in Florida. We had our incident management team from the OEM office that was deployed down in Texas. So we're not only supporting and preparing for events here in our own state, but we're also very willing, ready, and able to support other communities. We all know the great work that the governor has done and the historic response that we've had to Puerto Rico with personnel, donations, just ongoing support, and that's going to continue well into the future. The issues in Puerto Rico we'll be talking about for years to come, and hopefully we can all say a little prayer that they don't get hit by anything this year. A very fragile system down there in Puerto Rico. So let's talk a little bit about our preparedness and response. I don't want to take a lot of your time today. We at OEM and within the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services are constantly preparing throughout the year because we just continuously go from one natural disaster season into the next natural disaster season. Some of our procedures and plans apply across the board, but there's other things that we focus on very specifically. One is our Coastal Storm Annex, which is a very important document. It's a big document, but it is a guide work of how we respond to natural disasters, coastal storm events, hurricane seasons. It's all accessible on the DHSES webpage. You go to emergency management, go to planning, you go to our comprehensive emergency management plan, and the Coastal Storm Annex is there for all of your reading pleasure, the 130-ish pages. Feel free to browse at your leisure. But this document really applies to all of our state agencies and authorities and the DPC and how we would respond to, prepare for, and deal with and recover from a major event. Some additional preparedness activities that we go on an annual basis throughout the season. This 18 June, we did our Mid-Hudson region meeting. It's a partnership with the National Guard and the OEM office, meeting with our regional counterparts down in Westchester, Rockland counties, those areas that could be impacted by an event. Back in early June, we had our Long Island meeting where we, again, meet with all of the locals to discuss coastal storm plans, review the county plans, make sure that they're in lockstep with the state plans, and it's all about that coordination and that review so that we are prepared and we're all singing from the same hymnal when we have an event. We've also participated in FEMA's annual hurricane prep VTCs. We've done tabletop exercises with Con Ed and with PSE&G. We've also continually on an annual basis, in the early part of the year, review our Coastal Storm Annex. A little later on, some of the other prep work that we've been doing for storm season, you're going to hear from our Division of Budget talking about our Disaster Preparedness Asset Tracking System. Again, that's another big aspect of what we do in our preparedness activities so that we are ensured that we have our resources cataloged and available. We have Deputy Commissioner Corey McLean is here from DISHES. We have our stockpiles, our 10 strategic stockpiles. His team is constantly ensuring that our equipment, our pumps, our generators, our light towers are ready for use and ready to be deployed into the field. We're continually meeting with our regional OEM teams, both at the county level and throughout the regions, to ensure that we're all prepped, that we're all on the same page, and that we're all ready for the eventuality of a storm. As Director Calhoun mentioned, our emergency response posture is a very hands-on approach. We're going to be very forward, very proactive into the communities, ensuring that we have the resources in play and ready to assist the communities as best we can for any type of an event, whether it's a big or small event. All of our state agencies are aware that we're going to be forward. We're going to continue to do that. It's the appropriate way to act to support and help the citizens of the state of New York, and that's part of our ongoing posture. We're going to continually pre-stage equipment and resources and assets. As I mentioned, we have 10 strategic stockpiles throughout the state that has various equipments from sandbag equipment to potable water tanks to pumps and generators and all kinds of various other miscellaneous equipment. But we'll pre-deploy those further into communities that may be impacted by a coastal storm event or any other weather event that we may encounter in the state of New York. Again, whether it be just stockpiling our water or our resources, and again, this is not a DHSCS only response. This is a state of New York response. all of our state agencies have resources and equipment and personnel available that can be brought to bear in a community or a region that is impacted by a major event, whether it be DOT with plow trucks or sanding trucks, or whether it's DEC with boats or parks with boats, state police with off-road vehicles, or whether it's DHS with some of our specialty equipment through our Office of Fire Prevention and Control and our USAR team, Urban Search and Rescue team, which was just deployed down in Poughkeepsie the other day on the building collapse. So it's that continuous review, and that's where this a DPAT application is so very important, that as we continue to move forward with that we catalog and capture all of our resources in a consistent fashion so that we know exactly what we have, where it is, and what its capabilities and capacities are. We continually evaluate the communities that we're working with and their capabilities, what they can and can't do. And a lot of communities, some are better than others, as we all know. They have better resources, they may be better equipped, but we continue to evaluate that through different sets of our organization that help us really lay out where we need to have that forward posture even sooner before an event happens. Director Calhoun mentioned our emergency response playbook. We have these continuous executive reviews, putting our emergency management protocols in place, establishing teams of executives that will go into regions, establish regional operations centers to help coordinate and monitor what's going on in a given area. Everything rolling back to the state EOC in Albany, where we're coordinating an entire response, but we will set up those regional areas. We have multi-agency coordination calls. Many of you, most of you at the tables have been on our MAC calls in the past when we have events, storms that are coming up as we're doing our preparation, and through events. We continue to do regional emergency management liaison calls with our counties that are impacted by a particular event, where OEM is talking to those county emergency managers, and that's an ongoing thing. We really are ensuring that coordination. Although we are being very forward and we're going to be out there and helping the communities, we are going to ensure that we coordinate as best we can with all those communities. Those communities that we operate, you've heard us over the last couple of years talk about New York Responds, a governor's initiative back 3 years ago when we developed and designed our incident management tracking system. New York Responds is that repository for all things that we have going on in the state. All counties in the state of New York have access to this, the emergency management agencies. They access and provide us updates. That's where they request assistance, request assets. All of that is done through New York Response, but they also have the capability to view a common operating picture on what's going on across the state of New York, to also foster that coordination and that cooperation between our agencies, between local agencies, and between counties that are working together back and forth. Just a request reminder on how the process goes. All resource requests for New York State assistance are processed through New York Responds. Municipalities communicate through county emergency management agencies. This also goes for our state agencies. There are times when we're looking to coordinate and get assets. We may have those assets in the stockpile, we may not have those assets in the stockpile, but if there are assets that we don't have in the stockpile, requests can be generated within New York Responds, and we will work to facilitate the acquisition of that commodity or product or resource that is necessary. County emergency management agencies process New York Responds requests for action. OEM prioritizes and tasks those priorities for assistance. And the counties, that's the benefit of this system, they're able to see what's going on, what the actions are of those particular requests, what the priority is, what the ETA is for the resource to be deployed, all again working towards that coordination. And then that county EM follows that request from start to finish. That is, you know, at a very high level, the preparation that we've been doing, we continue to do throughout the season to ensure that we are fully prepared to deal with any type of an event. Before I wrap up, I wanted to just kind of, one of the things that we've all know dear and close to our hearts is Lake Ontario and Lake Ontario season last year. I can thankfully say that we are already over the peak in Lake Ontario. We're in a much better place than we were. We were very, it was not looking great in January and February. It was already well above the 2017 levels at that time. But fortunately, as I mentioned, that 120 days of January, that actually helped us. Started to later in the season, warming during the day, staying cold at night, let the water drain off in a much slower fashion. We've had record outflows of the Moses Saunders Dam up in the St. Lawrence, which have all helped to keep Lake Ontario at bay. It's currently 23 inches less than it was this time last year. That is very, as you all know, very, very significant. At this point last year, we had some major disasters going on. We had deployed over 1.6 million sandbags last year at this point. We had 10 sandbagging machines out, any number of National Guard and New York State employees and resources out in the field, regional command posts out in the field. It's only 7 inches higher than the long-term monthly average, and it's forecasted to go down another 3 inches over the course of the next 30 days. So we've already seen that peak. By end of June, early July, it'll be back down or below its long-term monthly average, which is a very significant thing. So we're in really good shape. We have pre-deployed some equipment in Niagara counties, in Monroe County, and Wayne counties. Some of our aqua dam and our sandbags that were some areas that are low-lying. Spring storms still have an impact on Lake Ontario when you get those northwest, northeast winds that were bringing the heavy rainfall to shore. We'll continue to have shoreline erosion as we move forward. That's just the nature of a large water body, as we see on the Pacific and the Atlantic, all up and down those coastlines where there's coastal erosion has happened for years. That will continue in Lake Ontario and Lake Ontario into the future. So we're in good space for Lake Ontario. And I'll just end with some of our own. I always throw together my own little prediction for the season. May not be the most exciting thing, but I see, I'm thinking 13 named storms. We've already had one. 8 hurricanes out of those 13 storms, and 4 majors this year. So that's my prediction. I think the Gulf of Mexico is going to be impacted from New Orleans to Tampa, going through the Florida Panhandle. That's where the first named storm went through. But anyway, thank you, everybody. And I think we've got a great rest of the meeting here from our other state agencies. So thanks.
Director Wisely, that's national, not New York State, correct?
That is national. That is not New York State impact. I didn't.
Like, you are about to be unemployed, dude. That is not pretty for
Thank
New York
you.
State.
Kevin, thank you very much. Especially that Lake Ontario report is very warm to my heart, boy.
Yes.
I love that. I lost my entire summer there, as many of us did. Kathy, you have some things to add, please?
Yes, I'm going to be, I have to step out, but I failed to mention one very important agency in the past several months, and I just want to give a special shout out to Mike Warden and the Public Service Commission, who I think definitely had their, well, yeah, your number came up. And I just want to applaud you, publicly for everything that the Public Service Commission did during these storms. When we had those back-to-back nor'easters, it was brutal. And as the DOT and the Thruway will tell you, it's like once the snow's gone and they've got 24 hours, their roads are cleared from snow. But working hand in hand with the National Guard, the Public Service Commission, the transportation, OEM, everybody working together to help get that power restored. But PSC's been on the ground. They're on the ground much longer. They're conducting investigations. So I just want to say thank you for all you did, and to just keep putting pressure on the utility companies to do things right. And on behalf of the administration, I just want to say thank you publicly. So thanks for all you did.
Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back in our seats at 10 minutes after. Thank you. Next up, state fair emergency plans. We have 2 presenters, Troy Waffner, Director of the Greater New York State Fair from Ag and Markets, and John Bell, Emergency Management Coordinator, Ag and Markets also.
Good morning. Thank you to the DPC and Commissioner Perino for inviting us in today. It's great to be here and great to present. You know, the state fair is coming upon us very soon, and we have a lot of plans going, a lot of work going on outside. And my name is Troy Waffner. I'm the acting director. I give a lot of presentations to Rotary clubs and Lions clubs and community groups, and I always start out with a picture of baby chickens because you can't hate baby chickens. You can hate everything else. I will say, looking around at this group, it's a slightly more intimidating group than your average Rotary club. So the state fair, you know, we attract just shy of 1.2 million people over 13 days. It's on average about 89,000 people a day who come onto the fairgrounds. We snarl traffic. We suck probably half of the agencies represented at this table into the vortex of our storm during the fair to assist us with traffic, to assist us with building, to assist us with code compliance, to assist us with inspection, and we truly appreciate that, and knowing it's probably a pain for most of the agencies to have to come and do, but believe me, without the partnership we have with the other agencies and our brothers and sister agencies, the fair would not go off the way it goes off. So these are just two photos taken 20 years apart. I'd ask you what is different, but there's absolutely nothing different in either of those photos. You know, and if you took that in 2014, you'd see the exact same images. And all that started changing in 2015 when the governor, you know, began an unprecedented investment in the fairgrounds to really change the face of it, to make it a more vibrant economic engine in central New York. And, you know, we've had, throughout this construction, you'll see pictures of a great partner in Commissioner DeStito and OGS, who actually comes out and makes sure the projects get done on time, under budget, and that everything is done to code. So here's what it looks like now. You know, you can see in 2015 the plans were announced. In 2016 we began construction with the implosion of the grandstand, and we opened up taking down the grandstand and opening up the track. We opened up 63 acres of land to development. We improved the infrastructure so water will actually drain away from the fairgrounds. When it used to rain there, you'd have lakefront property most of the time. And now all of those problems are, for the most part, diminished. We built a new 313-space RV park. We built a 15-acre paved midway. We built a building site for a future building. We added a festival grounds. We made improvements throughout the fairgrounds. You know, those are the big improvements we made, but it came down to cleaning facades on the older buildings and really making sure that the historic buildings that we have were maintained, cleaned, and fixed. And, you know, just as the last major building on the fairgrounds took place somewhere in the 1930s. And since that time, no major investment had been made in the fairgrounds until 2015 when the governor stepped forward. And since then, he'll have invested over $120 million in the entire plan, which includes the paving of our orange lot, which is our biggest lot that borders Onondaga Lake. And it'll take it from 4,500 crappy spots to 7,350 paved, striped, mall-type parking spots. So here's what we're doing this year. This is probably the final piece of the puzzle in a lot of ways, and it's to build an exposition center. It's 136,000 square feet overall, 110,000 square feet of expo space. You know, it's the largest exposition space between Cleveland and Boston and up, you know, north of New York City. Our plan is it'll be done by this year's fair. Commissioner DeStito tells me it'll be turned over to us on August 3rd, so on August 6th. You know, the governor wanted something new and different to put in it, so we're building a temporary NHL-sized ice rink because we've never ice skated during the state fair. And we're programming with ice tournaments, broomball tournaments, hockey tournaments, open skate, tying it to our special days. And it's going to be a great way to kick off the building and have a grand opening for it. But, you know, in the non-fair, which is really, you know, we run the 13 days of the fair, which everybody knows about. It's that other 50 weeks a year when people wonder what we do. But those other 50 weeks a year, we have 130 shows that take up 832 event days. And having this building here and opening up that land from the previous projects is going to allow us to exponentially grow the impact of those numbers and grow the number of people visiting the fairgrounds, grow the number of people coming to the shows in the non-fair. And it is a huge facility. The beautiful part is the 110,000 square foot of flex space. It's clear span. We'll be able to set up for anything. Our plan is to have major horse shows one weekend and turn it over for sporting events, concerts, major trade shows, and consumer shows that we're starting to book right now. You know, right now, just for the non-fair, we have at least 9 new events booked, you know, ranging from fall harvest fests and drone racing competitions to major horse shows, consumer shows. These are shows that have never been to Central New York, probably never been in upstate New York, and we're working with a lot of great partners on getting those shows here. But just looking at the numbers, 2015, before the construction began, we were at about 900,000, and the number had somewhat leveled out. There it would go up some, it would come down some, but it leveled out. In the last 2 years, from the hype of the construction on the fairgrounds, but more importantly, the perception that the fairgrounds is changing, certainly the perception, which is real, that the fairgrounds is a more comfortable place. You know, in the last 3 years, we've set daily attendance records every year, and I think our daily attendance record is now north of 125,000 people in one day. And you know, you can now put that many people on the fairgrounds at once, and you're not bumping into people, you're not hitting people with carriages. There's enough space on the roadways, enough space on the fairgrounds now where you can freely flow without interruption. And, you know, you can see that in our numbers. Our numbers are up 25% in terms of the fair attendance. And during the non-fair right now, our numbers are up about 34% in terms of non-fair attendance at these shows. Just, you know, just quickly, you know, the construction is the main part of it, but we've also, you know, the governor challenged us, and certainly, you know, a lot of the local officials challenged us to make sure that it's not just your grandfather's state fair, you know, so it's not in terms of building it, it's not in terms of programming. We do a lot of outreach. We've diversified the people who come to the fair. We've reached out, done a tremendous amount of outreach to bring in new shows, new exhibitions, new and fun things. And it's something we do. We try to introduce 24 new things a fair. Gives us 24 new things to talk about, and more importantly, gives us 24 more things to bring people in. You can't really read this. We've also introduced a number of special days, you know, from $1 days to $3 Thursdays to Midway Mondays to anything that basically rhymes, we'll try. And, you know, it brings people in and it brings people back multiple times, which is important. And, you know, the fun is back in the fair, I think, at this point, and people enjoy it. People are enjoying the experience. And it's funny, you know, we always talk about the 13 days of the fair, but that helps propel our non-fair business, too, because now more and more people are coming to both. You know, at the end of this, right after me is going to be John Ball, who's going to talk more about our emergency preparedness. But just so everybody knows, it's 63 days to the fair. Our attendance goal is 1.2 million, and I usually don't ask for favors from anybody, but if all of you could come multiple times, bring your family, bring your neighbors, bring your communities, rent school buses, and help me get to that number, I'd really appreciate it. One last thing before John comes up. You know, this year is kind of it's a year we look back in a little bit of agony, because 20 years ago this Labor Day was a Labor Day storm at the New York State Fair where 2 people were killed. And if the fair actually didn't open up on Labor Day. And if you look at our emergency plan from 20 years ago, it's a little mischaracterized, but part of the plan was really to run in the other direction, to where we've come working with a lot of the agencies sitting at this table, working with Kevin Weisling, the folks at Dishes, working with the state police, OGS, the Thruway, DOT, all of our partners. You know, where our emergency planning and emergency management has come, and our SEMP is absolutely amazing. We now have one. We exercise it. We work on it. Every year we improve it. You know, we meet regularly with our partners and all of this, and it's something that we're truly proud of. And certainly, you know, you never want to talk about the bad situations, but I think we're ready for it, knock on wood. With that, I'd introduce John Ball, our agency emergency coordinator.
Good morning. Thank you, Troy. Commissioner Perino, Kevin, thank you for the opportunity. The fair, you know, for 13 days becomes somewhere in the median of county populations in New York State. As Troy talked about earlier, you know, an average daily population, it's a jail term from my old life, but, you know, an average population on the grounds of 85,000 people, and that's a significant amount of folks to pack into an area as condensed really as the fairgrounds is. So, you know, it's always incumbent to have a good plan, to be prepared. And we're blessed to do that with the group that's sitting here at the table and your employees and your staff. We can't say it enough, the cooperation with those partner agencies, and I'll go through a few of them here in a minute. What it allows us to do is to collectively put on a fair, an event of the magnitude that New York State is. And, you know, Homeland Security, the federal Homeland Security ranks these events in the New York State Fairs, you know, just outside of the top 100 major events in the United States every year. So, you know, it's something that, you know, comes with a lot of responsibility that we all share. So, oh boy, this is not labeled. I hope I do. That was the wrong way. So there you go. So for this year, the planning and framework for the things that we can't control. So our vulnerabilities, there's assessments done, and we know the things we can't control, and those are things that keep most of us awake at night. And those are the bad weather events that we can't control, and human acts of bad things, acts of terrorism, hostile events, vehicle rammings, pick an event that happens every day on our news. And those are things that we're working on preparing for. While we can never really have a plan, it's really good to have some expectation management of what we expect from our responding agencies. And I'm here to say that in New York State, it is very apparent when I spoke with other state fair folks from around the state, including Texas, Idaho, state of Washington, and California, they aren't as prepared as we are. They don't have the plans, and really did ask for a copy of our plans when they're done, because as the folks from Texas said, when New York does it, they do it big and they do it right. And so that's a testament to the folks from Homeland Security and the governor's staff who've put together this whole community over the last half dozen years. So Asher, most of us are familiar, active shooter hostile event response. NFPA just came out with probably one of their defining frameworks, the NFPA 3000 document. Our response plans now are being centered on that protocol. It's probably one of their finest works. What really drove that home was the event in Las Vegas, the Country Music Festival last fall, where so many people were killed. And so a lot was learned from that, and the lessons learned, and that is playing into our plans now this year for the state fair. So with New York, we really get a lot of support from the state police, goes without saying, but also this year we've brought the New York State Parks Police, the DEC local law enforcement wing of the DEC, our local law enforcement agencies, Onondaga County, the town of Gaddis, where the state fairgrounds is located, or outside the city of Syracuse. EMS, local EMS, New York State Department of Health EMS Bureau has been remarkable in their support this year. And we've all met already. We're having continuing discussions on the importance of how we work together. While the state police really do retain logistic control of the response, being it on state property, it takes everybody to pull this off and to get it done right. And we all recognize that, and everybody is very willing to work together to get that done. As we know, a mass casualty incident starts with one thing, and that's a mass gathering. So for 13 days, we've got the first precursor of an MCI with the fair just running its normal course. It just needs that one spark, that one incident to have things go bad. So I'm really comforted with these partner agencies around this table and in this room to have a piece of comfort. So our concentrations this year were the medical surge plan, as a standalone annex, the severe weather annex. Now it's just part of our SEMP, backing that out and making its own standalone document, because the weather is such an important factor in upstate New York. Steve talked about earlier his counterpart from Binghamton, where Syracuse falls under, Dave Nicosia. These guys do great work, and their services that they provide really put us at ease, because as we know, these storms come up with no notice. And Labor Day storm, 1998, Troy mentioned, there was deaths on the fairgrounds, and let's hope that that never happens again. Evacuation shelter in place, very, very important, not only for the 13 days of the fair, but for those other 50 weeks. The Syracuse Nationals are coming up in June or in July. The single largest event outside of the fair will have 60,000, 70,000 people on the fairgrounds and millions of dollars worth of classic vehicles and celebrities. So those are the things we have to plan for those other 50 weeks too. The new thing that we are introducing this year, and again, a lesson learned from Las Vegas, is the recovery section. And reaching out, working with the State Office of Mental Health, Office of Victim Services, the Red Cross, the NGOs that support all of that. That's something that we really didn't have a good handle on. We're much better prepared this year thanks to mental health really taking the lead and helping us in that piece, in that segment. We have some work to go, but Family Assistance Center, the support to the victims, to the families, to the employees, and all of that comes in along with any tragic event. And it doesn't have to be just an act of terrorism. It could be a building collapse, not diminishing that. It could be an act of weather. It could be vehicle ramming. It could be a gang fight. When you have the diversity of people on the grounds and with the amount of special days, every one of those special days gives somebody else a reason to maybe make it a less than happy event. Gay Pride Day, Native American Day, pick a day, and there's somebody that has an equally opposing view to those groups. So it's always an opportunity, an incubator for something to go sideways. Joint support. We cannot do this without the joint support. The Office of the Governor, Homeland Security in all of its glory in all of their divisions, right down to the planning folks, the ops, logistics folks, OEM, OFPC, Interoperable Communications, Office of Counterterrorism. They stand up 24/7 to support us. State Police, DOT. You talk about traffic management in the nightmares of trying to squeeze a watermelon through a drinking straw, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing in all these vehicles on roadways that were built for 50 years ago. So we're doing. It really is remarkable when you think back and look at the amount of activity. How smoothly it really does go. Yeah, there are burps now and then, but it really goes slow. So again, look at the state agencies, and every one of those has such a pivotal role. But I want to show that it's also the federal agencies, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, TSA, they have supported us in the well. Amtrak runs right adjacent to the fairgrounds, and for 13 days it becomes a recognized Amtrak stop. So they play a role in this. The FAA controlling the drones now is more of an issue. I've had some great discussions with the folks in Rochester. And again, if they can put up a temporary flight restriction over the fairgrounds, but the key is how do we enforce that? We don't. And it's very difficult for any law enforcement to support it as well. So we have to do some public education in understanding what the code, what the federal regulations are, and making sure the public is aware of it as well, and know that if they are caught, they will be held accountable. Those are the FAA's words, not mine. National Weather Service. Again, we heard from Steve earlier. They play such a pivotal role in the safety of the fairgrounds. Again, that's the one of the two things we really can't control. And with their technology and with their willingness, not only for being on site for the 13 days, they're also virtual presence. We always are under their watchful eye, and also with some local media partners in Syracuse. We're blessed to have our own local Doppler radar. I'm not putting a plug in, but from the ABC affiliate, and they're great partners to have because they really give us 24/7, 365-day-a-year peace of mind. And they're also using the Weather Service this year is going to use it for kind of a teaching ground for their new meteorologists, train their replacements. This is what goes on, and so it's going to be an exciting time for us to have them part of our team right on the grounds this year. AMR, they provide the medical, the EMS response for the 13 days of the fair. The Part 18 requirements for the other 50 weeks of the year. The Central New York group is superb with their support. They bring in their trailers, so if there is a serious incident where we do have a guy comes in or a person comes in with an Uzi and shoots 100 people, we're going to have those tactical combat care kits, those tourniquet kits and quick clot to attend up to 300 people. With the onset of the Lakeview Amphitheater. That's an Onondaga County facility, but it's a vital partner. When the grandstand came down, the Lakeview Amphitheater became another concert venue. During the state fair this year, there are 6 events that will be taking place simultaneous, large concerts. That adds another spoke in that wheel of insanity, especially for the parking people and the state police, because we're parking another 15,000 cars on top of the 85,000 or 100,000 there for the fair. So those particular days, the cooperation with the local hospitals and EMS and AMR, the use of the state fair's infirmary to take care of the things that can be taken care of in the field, the bee stings, the overdoses, the alcohol, the sun poisoning, things like that. Most of the city hospitals in Syracuse go on diversion during the fair because it's just the onslaught of having all those extra people there, and it becomes very problematic. So again, working with AMR is wonderful, and they take a big load off of us. Solway Fire Department, this is where I end. The Solway Fire Department is the district. It's a volunteer fire department, and the State Fairgrounds falls in their district. And for 13 days, they have their own fire department on grounds, 24/7 staffed. And, it's funny, but you take for 13 days, that small piece of property on the outskirts of the city of Syracuse becomes its own county. And I assure you, as sure as I'm sitting here, that it is the safest and most secure parcel in the United States for those 13 days. Just the incredible amount of support, the people, the volunteers, the people at this table. You've got a lot to be proud of, and I'm gonna take my boss up on one thing here. He said he's shooting for 1.2 million. I think it's gonna be a lot closer to 1.5 million this year. That's my personal projection. The advent of that expo center is really going to be a driving force for the future, not only of the fairgrounds, but what it does for the regional economy too. So it's important to keep those people safe and have this safe event. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. It was awesome. Wildfire prep and outlook. Eric Laird, Forest Division of DEC. So truth be told, I was touring Lake Ontario a couple of weeks ago when we didn't know that it was going to work out for us, and there was a forest fire not too far away, 25 minutes. We decided to go drive to it because I wanted to go see how we did it. I got to the bottom of the hill. There's like two locals exhausted. I think it was the county fire coordinator or something. I was like, where's DC? Oh, they're up that hill about a mile fighting the fire. I said, I'll wait for the June presentation. So I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. And thank you for the invite from the DPC as well as DSHES. Again, my name is Eric Lahr. I'm the director for the New York State Forest Rangers. I've been a ranger for 30 years now, and it's been a unique opportunity from my perspective to have the privilege to serve as the director for the Rangers and work with what I consider some of the greatest people to offer public service in the state. With that said, I think I am going to try to attempt to discuss what wildfire occurrence is and kind of give a real quick overview on the historical perspective of wildfire in New York State. Based on some of the predictive modeling services that we have available to us through National Weather Service, I'll give my best forecast. Since we're already in June, we're going to be really looking at the remainder of the year. And finally, I'm just going to identify some wildland fire resources that may not be readily apparent to everyone in the room. But before I begin, I just want to do a quick icebreaker. And if we could just show the video. And I'll tell you to cut it off when I'm... There is a video. You good? It's not playing.
There's nothing there.
That's okay. We'll just proceed without it, and we'll go from there. Did you minimize the PowerPoint? If you try that, it may work. No? Okay. We'll just pass on. Basically what the video was, instead of showing it, was forest rangers working on a fire that occurred down in southern New York State on the Sam's Point fire, those of you that were familiar with it. And it was an extraordinary event, and it was an event that had occurred, a similar event that occurred within the last several years. So the point that I was trying to make by showing the video was that we do have large wildfire in New York State, and we do need to prepare for it. It's not advancing. Oh, there's the video. We'll show about a minute of the video. I'm sorry, this is not working out the way we had hoped. Again, this is extreme fire behavior, and we do experience this from time to time in New York State, and we do need to be prepared for it. The individual that is in this particular helicopter, and we'll talk a little more about it in a few moments, is we identify them as crew chiefs within the Ranger ranks, and they work very closely with New York State Police Aviation Unit.
How many gallons of water does one of those drops have?
This particular bucket was, I think on this ship was approximately 300 gallons, the bucket capacity. However, we don't always want to fill it up to the maximum capacity. I like this particular video because it does show the coordinated effort between the helicopters. Whenever you got multiple aircraft in the air, you have to exercise extreme caution, and our people are trained to manage aviation aircraft and working with the New York State Police pilots. So again, this was the Sam's Point fire. It ended up being 2,028 acres, and it occurred it started on April 23rd in 2016. So we can cut it there. That's fine. So this is a basic graph of the number of wildfires per day in New York over a 15-year history. And as you can see, between the months of March and May, we experienced the highest number of fires. Total number of fires here that was reported was over 80,000 fires, and that was reported by through OFPC as well as New York State Ranger fires that we were involved with. And the fires that occur in the early part of the year, it's obviously we don't have a lot of fires at that time of year because of the snowpack. And the reason we have such a high number of fires during the month of April and between March and May is because we haven't had green up at that point in time in the season. And until the leaves come out on the trees, that solar radiation is just eating up the forest floor, and that's why we end up with the big fires in the springtime. As you experience seasonal drying throughout the remaining portion of the year, those fuels on the surface will tend to dry out, and you still have fires, but the fires in the summer months are generally smaller in size, and they oftentimes, however, are more difficult to control because the soil moistures are dried out, and you actually get duff fires. And then as you progress through the remaining portion of the year, you tend to get the curing effect in the fall, where all the fuels are going dormant, and you tend to see a lot of grass fires. A couple of things I just want to note on this slide real quick. April 15th is the day where we historically have experienced the greatest number of wildfires anywhere in the calendar year. And another interesting spike is on July 4th. And that's because, obviously because of the fireworks. But it's interesting. Along with the number of wildfires, we also have identified where we have the largest fires, and again, that's in the spring. And fortunately for this year, we got through the spring season with relatively low number of fires. And but again, in the summer months, even though it doesn't reflect very well on the graph here, those fires tend to be very difficult to control because they are burning down into the duff layers. This is just another way to express the information at hand. And if you look at the green, purple, and the blue at the bottom, basically it's a monthly breakdown, and that's where you tend to have the greatest number of fires. And in terms, the greatest number of fires and the greatest acreage. So some of the significant fires that we've had in recent years, we had the Overlooks fire in April 17th in 2008, Crescent Bow fire down in Long Island, that was about 1,000 acres, Rizzo Gap, 2,700 acres, and the Sam's Point just 2 years ago. So we do have large fire history that we experience here in New York State. Oftentimes when the ranger gets involved, it gets beyond the ability of local resources, and we will respond at that time. When we typically respond when any time that there's a fire over 10 acres or it goes into a multi-operational period. This is an interesting map, and it shows again, ranger and fire department fires, again, around 80,000 fires over a 15-year history. And this graphically represents where we have high occurrence of fires. And it depends on your perspective. Where do we have the greatest risk of wildfire? Obviously, downstate in the Long Island region, we have a high number of fires. However, a lot of the fires down there, as well as even in the southeastern portion of the state, are relatively small, and they're controlled by our first responders, the local fire departments. They do a tremendous job keeping our wildfires in size from anywhere from a tenth to an acre in size. Without their support, we would have a much more severe wildfire problem in New York State. But where you have people, you have wildfire, you have the risk of wildfire. You'll notice in the Adirondacks, where I have nearly 40% of my staff located, it shows up as green. That doesn't mean that there's not a risk there. We get a lot of recreational folks that go there annually, and we end up having a number of campfires that escape our control, but it just doesn't reflect well in the map. This is the fire danger rating area map that we put out. We administer 13 remote area weather stations across the state where we extract information and produce this map daily during the fire season. And we're hoping to take advantage of the state's Mesonet system in the future so that we can get a little better detailed maps. But right now, we've got the state broken into 10 fire danger rating areas. And again, this is produced daily. It's used by a number of different folks here in Dishes. Anyone that's conducting prescribed fire across the state will look at this daily to make sure that they're within safe parameters to conduct their burns. The causes of wildfire, these are fires that were reported solely by rangers during that last 15-year period. And again, downstate, the leading cause of fire as reported by rangers over that 15-year period is incendiary. So we continue to have an incendiary concerns on the island. Elsewhere in the state, the leading cause annually is always caused by debris burning. And that points to why, if you recall, my earlier graph that during the month of April we have a high occurrence of fires, why we put the burn ban into place during that period of time. In the Adirondacks, the leading cause again is campfires. So, and that historically has played out for the last 15 years or so. Since we put in the burn ban in 2010, the effect of that has been that it has reduced the risk of wildfire throughout New York State. It has provided relief for our first responders, the fire departments that have to go to these types of fires. And this map basically shows representation of every county across the state. We have seen a reduction of about 35% in wildfire activity. So my view on that is that's a great thing, because that allows our local fire resources to spend their time responding to other types of emergencies if necessary. The last 2 years, again in 2016 when we had the large fire in the southern part of the state, 2016 was a typical year or a normal year for our activity, and these are just ranger reported fires that we were involved with. And we responded to about 4,200 acres. Half of that was the Sam's Point fire. Average size fire was nearly 23 acres. Total number of fires reported that year by fire department as well as our agency was almost 4,000. We sent one crew out west. We do have a very active Western fire program, and that's where we bring a tremendous amount of skill back into New York State, and it has benefited our program tremendously throughout the years. In addition to the crew, we sent out 12 single resources. These are highly trained people that we oftentimes will plug into incident management teams when they return back to New York on state incidents. I drew this comparison because in 2017, we only responded to 55 fires, and it was only 191 acres. What happened in 2017? We had rain, rain, rain. So last year this was reported as the second lowest number of fires that historically we have ever had to report to. Where did we end up? We ended up on the Lake Ontario shores with a lot of other responding units addressing the flooding. So, but because we had a slow wildfire year in 2017, we were able to send out more resources out west than we had ever done prior to last year. If you look at the 25-year history, we're averaging 209 fires per year that we respond to, and the average acreage per year is just over 2,000. So what is the outlook for the remaining portion of the year? This is some information that I extract, and it's information that I oftenly refer to. And each one of these forecast maps or fire potential outlook maps represent the month. So we've got, they're currently projecting up through September, and it's pretty much normal. The fire potential is normal, and the question is, what does that mean in terms of fire? It means we're not going to have an extreme year where we're going to expect excessive drying, and I'll go into that in a little bit in more detail. I'm hoping this doesn't conflict with what was said earlier, but it's a little more detailed, I think, than what you previously saw. And in June, the temperatures, we're looking at normal temperatures primarily through most of New York, and it's not until August that temperatures actually may be a little bit below normal, so it might be a little cooler projections here. As far as precipitation goes, above normal, and I think that plays out with some of the tropical depressions that are being projected coming up from the southeast. Anytime we have a lot of hurricanes, that moisture generally comes up the East Coast, and that has a mitigating effect on our fine fuel moistures. The drought outlook, and I did speak with our forecaster here earlier, and This map came out June 5th, but a new map is going to be coming out apparently in the next week or so here, and it will show all of New York State in being in yellow. And the reason I like to refer to the drought maps is because that is directly related to soil moistures. And during August, again, when we have those ground fires, they generally put up a lot of smoke, and they'll linger for days. And those are the kinds of fires that we get a lot of complaints about simply because of the smoke, but very difficult to put out. Seasonal outlook, again, normal. Hopefully that will play out. I'm not a meteorologist. I take advantage of the tools that are available to me, and I just use the caveat that, you know, you speak with any meteorologist, they'll tell you 3 or 4 days out is the best prediction, but they do have these models, and I use them to the extent that I can. I'm just going to skip over that. So what is our forecast summary for this year? Yeah, it's near normal fire potential for New York State through the end of the summer. Normal, what does that mean? Normal means we will experience wildfires in New York State, okay? Again, normal to below normal temps throughout the summer, above normal to normal precipitation as well through the summer. Most fires will be controlled at 1 acre or less. 95% of our fires are generally that 1 acre category or less. It's those bigger fires, those 10, 100 acre fires that we typically will get called into. Small fires will defy suppression efforts and grow large. Several fires will exhibit extreme fire behavior. Firefighters must remain alert at all times. The final portion, I think, points to some of our preparedness efforts going into this season, and we've been preparing since early February as far as mobilizing our assets. And currently we have 112 Rangers that went through their annual firefighter refreshers. So we do this every year. It's training that they are required to go through. But again, we have 1,700 paid and volunteer fire departments across the state, and they provide the greatest level of support as well as assets in terms of suppressing wildfire in New York State. I spoke very briefly about our crew chief program. Again, all of our people are fully equipped with working with the state police helicopters. They ride in the ships alongside with the pilots. The pilots run the ship. We will operate the Bambi buckets, or if we're involved with search and rescues, we'll operate the hoist for the search and rescues and dropping the litters. In 2016, our crew chiefs went through 75 training events for more than 250 hours, and that's all cross-training with the state police. Without those state police assets, our jobs would be very difficult, and every opportunity I have, I thank them. These are some of the aviation assets that are available, and state police have assets, obviously in the Albany hangar, but also down in Newburgh. And the Huey is our preferred choice when being involved with fire suppression, because they have the greater lifting capacity for those buckets. In addition to that, on Overlook's fire, we did utilize Blackhawks through a DMNA request, and they came in and they have a tremendous bucket capacity. I think almost 800 pounds in their buckets. So, in addition to the Blackhawks, some of the local municipalities, counties, Western New York, Buffalo, Syracuse, I think Rochester, they all have a ship, and there's a couple of smaller ships, helicopters down in the southeastern portion of the state as well. Some of the fixed wing assets that we use when we get to a point where we start seeing things are really drying out and we're seeing high occurrence of fires, we will actually have aerial detection, and we make those requests through the state police, and we'll fly a particular area of concern and make sure that we are spotting whatever smokes are out there. Another resource that's aviation resource that is available to us that we infrequently use, but we have used in the past, are the tankers that come out that we can mobilize through our Northeastern Forest Fire Protection Commission agreement. New York State is a member with, in short, the Compact, which is made up of all the New England states as well as the eastern provinces in Canada. These are some of the assets, the CL-415s and the 215s. They typically hold about 1,500 gallons of water, and they can scoop in less than 12 seconds. So they have a tremendous capability. However, you need to have big open country to be able to use aircraft like that. More preferably are the single engine air tankers that are available to us through our compact agreement. And New Jersey also has a fleet of single engine tankers that, if necessary, we can tap into. New on the horizon, the DEC has been very active in a small UAS program or small drone program, and we have been utilizing our drones. We currently have 7 drone pilots already trained. Within the agency, we have nearly 20 pilots, and we are equipping them with that equipment. This was a prescribed fire that we were involved with not too long ago, and the ability to use that equipment, just to identify where your resources are on the ground, is tremendous value to me. My number one protocol, however, when it comes to use of drones, that I've put out to my staff, is they do not go up in the air when state police aviation assets are in the air. So they have a special use. Some of the other things that Rangers have, again, most equipment is provided through local volunteer fire departments, but we do have some assets. We have one Type 3 asset and an engine that we actually got through the U.S. Forest Service as federal excess property. In addition to that, we outfitted Type 4 engines, and we have a number of Type 6 and 7 engines. Most of the Type 6 and 7 engines, there's one there, that's a Type 6 engine. Most of them are converted old Ranger trucks that we made into fire apparatus, and they work very well. In addition to that, we have a number of UTVs as well as ATVs that are equipped with small portable tanks, and they're very effective in the backcountry, being able to provide water to where we need it. The other thing that we have and we equip every year are the fire trailers. These are mobile units that we can move to the fires. Starting in February, we pre-position these things throughout the state. One goes to each ranger zone. The state is broken up into 17 ranger zones, and then we have one on hold, fully equipped. And what you find on these trailers is typically equipment that you may not normally see in some of your local fire departments. It's more backcountry equipment where the Rangers are accustomed to working. It includes everything from portable pumps, chainsaws, helicopter landing zone kits, blivets, portable tanks, you name it. And this is our fire cache, which is primarily it's federally funded. With some of the federal funding sources that we have that we dedicate towards fire. And this is where they maintain all of our equipment, they test our equipment, they test everything, and in addition to that, they actually outfit all of our new patrol vehicles as they come in each year. So that is it. Is there any questions?
Actually, I have one. If the spring burn bans are so effective in reducing fires during the spring, has there ever been consideration to having that a year-round ban, or is there reasons why we need to burn in certain parts of the year?
There has been discussion on that. The reason debris burning continues to be the leading cause of fire in New York State is because it's after that snowpack is melted, people are cleaning up their yards and what have you. And that's why we identified the period of time to do that, to go down a path of prohibiting burning all year long. That's something that'd have to be a regulatory effort. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think you'd see even a greater reduction in fires. It's not going to reduce the number of campfires and some of these other things, other types of fires, but it would likely reduce the reduction in debris burning.
Based on what you just shared, I mean, is there going to be some type of outreach, or is there any kind of PR materials that we can help get out to our to people that we work with about wildfire dangers? I know when I was out there, I saw a lot of do you have a home safety zone, having a buffer around your house, figuring stuff out?
Yeah, we do have wildfire risk reduction efforts that are in place, and you can just simply go on our website, and a lot of that information is there.
PR material you want us to get out? Is there a PR material, or is there?
There's wildfire mitigation for the homeowner that we have available. Yes. Any other questions? Thank you.
Eric, thank you very much. Food service during disasters. Robert Sattinger, am I pronouncing that right? Shatner. Director of Food Production Center, Docks. So I understand you've been sworn not to talk about missing trucks?
No. What truck?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Shattinger. I'm the Director of Nutritional Services for the Department of Corrections and Community Services. I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity, and on behalf of Acting Commissioner Annucci, showing what the Food Production Center is and share with you a few of the success stories that we've had over the years. Do you have the? Take two.
Consultant-based, let's be honest, and very worked with them for so long that nobody there wants to take a role and, need a change. Exactly.
I'm looking to go see my dad this weekend.
It was up in the 80s and on the floor.
For a 95-year-old?
Yeah.
He's better than the average 95.
Are you serious?
Can we roll without the visual? Is that possible?
Okay. So basically, the Department of Corrections and Community Services has a food production center. It's located in Rome, New York, right in the center of the state. We provide the food for all 54 of our state correctional facilities. We also provide food to 24 counties. We work with 4 Office of Mental Health facilities. So it's a very big operation. We do large quantities of food. So we're always called upon, it seems, to be able to assist in disasters. We do a variety of different items like soups and stews, baked chicken. You know, when we do baked chicken for our population, it takes 46,000 pounds of chicken to do one meal. You know, so we have the capability of doing very, very large quantities of food. And just recently with the hurricanes of last year, we were called upon to go to Texas when they had their hurricane. We got a call about 5 o'clock in the afternoon to head to Texas with about 40,000 ready meals that had to go to the food bank just outside of Houston, Texas. 2 of our drivers agreed to do it. We got on the road, drove through the night, and were able to get food to Texas. Except we were inundated by the waters, and that truck never made it. But we did send 3 other trucks. We sent 3 trucks with 40,000 bag lunches that went to various shelters in Texas. And then after that, we did Hurricane Maria with the Puerto Rico effort. We had again got called to bring food and supplies from JFK Airport to Key West, Florida, to meet a ship that was going to Puerto Rico. The ship was on a very strict deadline. The drivers had to go, and they had to drive through the night, and they made it. They had to be there by 6 o'clock in the morning. They were there at 3 a.m., and they were able to get the goods on the ship. So those are the 2 recent things that we've done. Over the years, we've done a lot with the ice storm up north back in the 90s, Hurricane Sandy. We did 40,000 kosher bag lunches for that disaster. And we were physically delivering bag lunches in the communities in New York City. Some of the other things we do, we're always working with Homeland Security to move from stockpile to stockpile. We have a large fleet of vehicles. We have 10 tractors and about 50 trailers. So, and being in the center of the state, and being that we're in all 54 of our correctional facilities around the state, we're able to assist, you know, coming back empty from our facilities. You know, we can stop at the stockpiles and move from one stockpile to the other. So it's, you know, just some of the things that we've done as a department to help out. Unfortunately, the PowerPoint didn't show, but you know, the quantity, the mass production is where the Department of Corrections helps out the most, because we're able to, food that we prepare this week, we ship it to our facilities next week, and they consume it on the 3rd week. So depending on the disaster, and they're never the same, we can provide food from our inventory immediately and then backfill that food for our facility. So it really is, you know, a great asset for the state. That's okay, I think, yeah. I think in a nutshell, that's what we...
Robert, way to improvise and adjust. Thank you, and we apologize for the technical problems. Disaster preparedness and asset tracking. Mark Massaroni, Laura Stetson, Robert Barbado.
Good morning. I'm Mark Massaroni, Chief Budget Examiner of the Planning, Operations, and Management Unit of the Division of the Budget Thank you, Commissioner Perino. Thank you, Kevin, for inviting us today to talk about the Emergency Asset Management Project, which you probably more routinely refer to as DPAT. Okay, we had our slide presentation.
This is your first disaster preparedness.
So at a high level, we just want to touch on a couple of things today. One is, what are we trying to achieve with the project? What is the project timeline? Secondly, what have we already achieved? We've collaborated with everybody in this room, and we've gotten a lot done already. And then lastly, what do we have yet to achieve? And then a little bit of time at the end for questions if you have any. So essentially, this project, the goal of this project is to enhance New York State's emergency response capabilities. And essentially, we're looking to move from an agency-centric view of asset data collection and management to an enterprise-wide view. Three elements of that are standardizing agency operating procedures. This is not an easy task. Every agency has their own view of the world, how they like to do things. So the Division of the Budget has been tasked with providing governance for this project because of our enterprise-wide view. So we'll be making some business decisions in conjunction with OEM. We also need to align on standard data definitions so that we're all speaking the same language when we're talking about emergency assets. And then finally, we need one IT solution to support and really sort of enforce the other two prongs of the initiative. If you go back to October of 2017, the Division of the Budget was tasked with creating for the governor a single asset inventory that also had an element of assessing the operational readiness of these assets. We were given 2 weeks, as you remember, to do this assignment. It was a Herculean task, and many of you in this room worked with us over Columbus Day weekend. We defined all the business requirements. We knew we didn't want spreadsheets. We didn't want handwritten copies. We didn't want data dumps out of people's systems. So we worked on the business requirements. We sent that over to ITS. Their development staff worked continuously that weekend. We also had calls with some of you about what the assignment was going to look like. And so on Tuesday morning, when your staffs came back from their nice restful Memorial Day weekend, we were able to hit the ground running. And we did achieve that 2-week target. I want to say it went smoothly all the way, but we kind of course corrected in real time, and everybody worked very hard, so we appreciate your effort on that. Phase 2 of the project, which we've been working on since that 2-week deliverable, is really about refining DPAT. So DPAT is a data collection tool that we plan on using for the next several months, but there will be a larger IT solution. DPAT is really limited in that it's an inventory system, so it's missing some of the key functionality that many of you have at your agencies for other operations. So purchase orders, FEMA reimbursements, things like that. So there will be a subsequent phase of this project to move to the Asset Works system, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. We did have some slides that showed you some of the actual data that you collected as part of the DPAT project. We required photos, we required geolocation, that was pretty critical. We required you to assess the operational readiness again of the asset. And this data really breaks down nicely on these standard definitions of asset type, asset subtype, and capacity. So for example, an aerial lift. An aerial lift, could be either self-propelled, could be transported in other ways. It's important to make that distinction. It's also important to make a distinction about what is the capacity of the aerial lift, for example. So if OEM requires aerial lifts with a reach of 100 feet, we have 125 aerial lifts that are self-propelled across the state. Only 7 of those have that capacity. So OEM can focus their efforts on really trying to get at those 7 to enhance their emergency response time. I wanted to show you today some of the dashboards that we created. We will be rolling these out to the commissioners of the DPC agencies so you can view and access your data, but also the enterprise-wide data. OEM is already utilizing this data, and we did provide a report out of this data to the governor in preparation for last fall's storm season. With the dashboards, we can really sort, filter on location. We can drill down from REDC regions, which, as you know, you all have different regional breakouts. We standardized on REDC regions. We can drill down to county. We can drill down to the specific GIS location of the asset. We can look at specific asset types, etc. Again, your staff has been critical to the success of, the accomplishments that we've made so far. So thank you for that. We really do appreciate it. Again, we did inventory over 20,000 assets in 2 weeks, and we had pretty good data quality. Dishes can now access the DPAT system. It's a single source of data for them in looking for assets for emergency mission support. DMV and OGS also collaborated on reissuing guidance to your asset managers. It's Budget Bulletin D750 on the acquisition and disposition of state assets, and also align that with the DPAT project. And then finally, recently, we've worked with your asset managers in a small group to sort of drive forward a little bit more on standardizing those data definitions, and they will be rolled out in asset version 2.0, which will be coming out in the beginning of July. When we release 2.0, we'll have some instructions for another field exercise to occur in July. Some of the new data fields and improvements are, we really improved some of the classifications, as I said, and we pulled out attributes, which are things that are not part of the underlying asset, but they're attachments to the asset. So the old DPAT, some of your staff kind of reached out to us and said, it doesn't make sense to call, a dump truck with a plow. Let's call it a dump truck, and you can attach a plow to it as one example. Because we've redone the data classification standards, it is going to require us to touch every asset and make an update to that entry. Because the existing data will have to be scrubbed so that we don't have that old classification mixed in with the new data standards. Another important element is standardized locations. So when we did the field exercise in October, the locations had to be, the physical address of the asset had to be hand entered, and this was a pain point for your staff when they were doing this. It also led to a lot of data quality issues because it wasn't standardized. So we've worked with your agencies to get the location, the physical location of all of your facilities. They'll be preloaded into DPAT 2.0. So when we do this exercise, your staff will be able to look by agency at the county that they're in, select county from a dropdown, and all of those physical locations will be pre-populated. So the goal of this field exercise is to kind of go back out, make sure we have good quality data that is aligned on these new standards, and work with OEM on sort of analyzing the data, pulling out are there any key insights that we can use to inform the playbook that they're working on. Cathy Calhoun mentioned, Commissioner Perino mentioned. The next phase after that, when we're migrating towards the Asset Works IT solution, we will be working with 8 agencies. Those are, you got an email on this just recently. Those agencies are DOT, the Thruway Authority, DEC, Parks, Docks, Homeland Security, State Police, and OMH. And we were really looking for a mix of agencies where, some of those agencies, emergency response is sort of pretty high up in your order of things that you work on, and for other agencies, it's a little more secondary. So we wanted that mix of perspectives in this project. What the project is going to do is look at what is the current state of your data collection, what are your operating procedures now, and make an assessment about what are the resources, how much time does it take to actually migrate to the Asset Works system. An important element here is on data migration. So you all have legacy data systems that you use. You need them for all kinds of purposes. So we need to preserve that legacy data. We need to come up with a plan for how you will access it post Asset Works implementation. And also, we don't want to interrupt your business continuity. You still have to do your day jobs as we're migrating. So that's it. I apologize we couldn't show you some of the dashboard views, but as I said, we'll be getting those out to you soon. And if anybody wants a demonstration, again, I'm Mark Massaroni. Feel free to contact me, and we'd be happy to walk you through the data and what it looks like. So with that, I'll any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Water Quality Task Force update. Martin Brand, Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Remediation and Materials Management, DEC.
All right, there we go.
No pressure, you're the last one.
I'm the only thing standing between Kevin Wisely and lunch, right? It's not a good spot to be in. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Martin Brand. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Remediation and Materials Management for the New York State DEC. I handle the haz waste programs, the solid waste programs, the mining programs, the oil and gas programs, the spill response programs, and also active in the water quality issues. As I like to term it, every dirty job that comes along, I get. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about what New York State is doing across the state to respond to emerging water quality issues. Well, what we're doing is a lot. You can see here it says ongoing response. And really what it is, it's ongoing and extraordinary response. Many of the people in this room have been helpful in that response as we move forward with the DEC and our partners in the Department of Health. And so I'm going to describe to you very quickly some of the things that we're doing. I want to introduce my partner today, Roger Sokol, who's the Director of the Division of Environmental Health Protection for the New York State Department of Health, and he'll be jumping in on the presentation here in a minute. So you may have heard and read in the papers that there's sort of an emerging water quality crisis in the country. Whether you call it a crisis or a disaster or concern is up to you, but certainly it's out there, it's in the news, and it's a growing and ever-present concern among the citizens of the state of New York. So how did we get here? Well, we got here a variety of different ways. One is there was sort of an emerging concern in the country. You had things like Flint, Michigan, and we had things like harmful algal blooms and water contamination emergency issues around the country. You know, it's hurricane season now. We've heard a lot about the weather, but our sort of perfect storm in this whole water quality thing started about 3 years ago with some of the Flint issues, and it shows no sign of abating as we go forward. So what are we looking at? Well, you know, we're looking at a kind of a changing paradigm the way people look at water. People took it for granted. They turned on the tap, water came out, they drank it, went about their business. Now, people aren't satisfied with that. They want to know what's actually in their drinking water. And there's certainly an attitude which we share, Governor Cuomo shares, and we share in DEC and DOH, that people essentially have a right to expect clean drinking water to come out of their faucet when they're paying for it. So we're looking at things like emerging contaminants, things like the perfluorinated compounds, the PFOAs and the PFOSs that you've heard about that come from either firefighting foam or industrial sources. We're looking at things like 1,4-dioxane, which is a legacy industrial contaminant. And we're looking everywhere at this point with a focus on drinking water. So we're looking at Hoosick Falls and Petersburg and Newburgh and some of those names you've heard in the press and areas on Long Island. So our focus is, again, on these emerging contaminants. These are the headlines, you know, from our state: Hoosick Falls, algal blooms around the state, contaminated water around Gabreski Air National Guard base out in Long Island. We're talking about PFAS compounds, again, the 1,4-dioxane. We're talking about harmful algal blooms. We're talking about salt in some situations where we're looking at. And the state is allocating significant resources to addressing these problems. Here's some slides of Hoosick Falls, and if you look really carefully, you might see Commissioner Zucker in the background there, helping out flush out POET systems. You might see Kevin Wisely, in some of these slides. It's really been a coordinated multi-agency effort across the state for the last 3 years. We've mobilized hundreds of staff just in the DEC and certainly in the Department of Health as we move forward. And again, Hoosick Falls was kind of the trigger here in New York State. A small community in upstate New York that was contaminated with PFOA in their water. And our response there was rapid, and it's continuing. So, what are we doing? Well, here's some of the first things we did. Well, first of all, the first bullet, New York took immediate action, and we're continuing to act. I talk around the state on what we're doing on water quality issues, and I keep using the phrase, in absence of federal leadership. EPA is yet to set national standards for these contaminants. EPA is yet to regulate these materials as hazardous substances, and they're just now having national conversations on PFAS and some of these other emerging contaminants. New York State jumped right on this. Early in 2016, we became the first state in the nation to regulate these materials as hazardous substances. That really unlocked the state Superfund and all our other resources and the resources from the people in this room to help respond to these issues. Also early in 2016, Governor Cuomo started what's called the Water Quality Rapid Response Team, and that's really going to be the focus of what I talk about here in the next few minutes. This is really a multi-agency team. Kevin Wisely talked about how disaster preparedness requires everybody in the room to be on the same team, work forward, have multiple agencies. Well, we're using the same concept here in the rapid response team. So many of the agencies represented here today are on our weekly calls. We work together. We're breaking down the boundaries between agencies, just finding where the resources and talents are so we can take advantage of everybody's skills and bring it to bear. We also have gotten some extraordinary resources from Governor Cuomo and the state legislature. Just in the last couple of years, we have this $2.5 billion Clean Water Infrastructure Act, which is really helping us continue to respond to these issues. As it shows here, not only did it provide an extra $130 million under the state Superfund for some of these investigations, it set up the Drinking Water Quality Council that Roger's going to talk about here in a little bit that's going to address some of the regulatory aspects of controlling these contaminants. But it gave us additional authorities under Superfund to look at things like landfills. It's providing some funding and resources for the Department of Health to go out and do additional testing of public water supplies around the state. It's helping fund some of our HAB programs. It's looking at lead replacement lines. There's a whole variety of things that are in that package, and that was continued through this year. So we're getting tremendous support from the state legislature and the governor's office on this. So what are some of the things we're doing? Well, one of the first things the team went out is try to find out what the universe of the problem is. So we've been surveying over 2,000 entities around the state, a variety of categories, whether it's industrial sources, manufacturing sources, landfills, Department of Defense facilities, fire departments, and fire training centers. Kevin Wisely and his team have been extremely helpful in helping us make contact with fire departments and fire training and fire response centers around the state, because that's where the firefighting foam, was used, and we're finding that that's a big contributor to these problems. So we're looking at all those facilities, we're mapping them, we're putting them on GIS, we're taking a look at what their relationship geographically is to public water supplies, and then we move forward to sampling. We've sampled over 125 sites so far just for the PFAS compounds. We're taking a look at groundwater issues, private water wells, public water supplies, both community, non-community, things like trailer parks, mobile homes, as well as the standard municipal systems. So as we identify these, they rise to the level of a state Superfund site, or in some cases, they just require some immediate action if water supplies are compromised. So what are we doing? Well, we're going out and providing water. That's the first thing we do. The state health department's goal is to mitigate exposures as soon as they're identified. So we provide things like bottled water, things like point of entry treatment systems. This is a home-style system, if you will, that provides carbon filtration to handle some of the perfluorinated compounds. Just in Hoosick Falls alone, we installed over 950 of those. That was probably the largest sort of private home well treatment program in the United States at the time. And we're doing it in other areas, Petersburg, Newburgh, some communities down in Long Island. So obviously our first response is to make sure people are getting clean drinking water. I'm going to skip over this and come back to it. And then some of the larger systems, you know, we're putting essentially community-wide treatment systems in. This is a picture of some work done at Newburgh, where we just installed a nearly $50 million system to treat water for 30,000 people in the city of Newburgh. And that's a system hopefully will go online here shortly. We've done similar systems with the responsible parties in Hoosick Falls and Berlin and Petersburg and other areas. So, you know, we're trying to respond as quickly as we possibly can, get these people back on clean water. And we're doing this with water line extensions where there are clean municipal supplies, where we can hook private water well users up to municipal supplies. We do that. We're doing that in the towns of Newburgh and New Windsor. We're doing it in several communities in Long Island. One little interesting aspect of a couple of the projects we have relate back to the storm theme, the weather theme. In Newburgh in particular, in Washington Lake, which was a surface water body that was used by 30,000 people for drinking water, since we took them off the lake and put them on the Catskill supply, we've had to institute a program to control water levels in the lake. Since they're no longer drawing drinking water off the lake, the hurricane season last year was quite active. We've had to pump over 200 million gallons of water out of that lake merely to control the water levels. So these are the type of response actions that we're getting that aren't just sort of chemical based, but it's sort of a holistic way of looking at the entire response. We're also looking, this is a slightly different focus here. It's out of the reactive mode, more of the proactive mode, but in concert with the Department of Health, we're looking at source water assessment. We're looking at watersheds. We're looking at ways we can identify how these watersheds are vulnerable, see if we can counteract those vulnerabilities so we don't get in these situations. So we're looking at nearly 2,000 watersheds around the state, evaluating them for things like potential sources of contamination. Department of Health and DEC are sampling a number of those public water systems that are identified in those vulnerable watersheds. And again, we're taking response actions where necessary. But again, with an eye that we can get out of the reactive mode and more into the proactive mode. One of the things this Clean Water Infrastructure Act did, and some of the budget bills that we got in 17-18, was give us additional authority to look at solid waste landfills from a drinking water quality and sort of a hazardous waste perspective rather than the traditional solid waste perspective. We were looking at over 2,000 former municipal landfills. These are landfills that were closed prior to the prescriptive regulations that came into effect in the late 80s. We're going back and looking at these facilities to see if there are concerns related to emerging contaminants that weren't previously identified. So we're sampling them for the PFAS compounds and the 1,4-dioxane compounds, again, with a focus on those that are proximal to public water supplies or private drinking water supplies to really prioritize our efforts there. So that sampling is continuing, and we'll have a report coming out in early 2019 that lays out what we found there. But again, as we go along, if we see a situation that requires mitigation, somebody needs a treatment system on a private well, there's an impact to public water supply, we act right away. And then we're going back at looking at our legacy Superfund sites. We have a number of sites that we've been working on for decades under the state Superfund program. We routinely change our sampling protocols, our priorities at those sites, and we're going back now and looking at all our significant threat sites, sites that are previously closed, previously remediated, maybe undergoing monitoring. And where appropriate, we're taking samples for these emerging contaminants to revisit some of these facilities to make sure that we're not missing something, and then we'll obviously make corrections or additions to the remedial programs that are in place in order to protect the public health and the environment. So we're looking at several hundred of those sites right now as well. The budget in 2017 gave us a little bit of money to actually help some of these communities with the firefighting foam aspects of it. We were finding out as we were going through our survey of fire departments and fire training centers that quite a few municipalities actually had old stockpiles of this PFC containing firefighting foam, the stuff that contained the PFOS that was a major concern for the public water supplies. So we have a little modest amount of money, which we've spent, and we're trying to get some more. that we're taking some of this foam out of the hands of the municipalities so they don't have to pay for that disposal, and that proactively it keeps it out of the stormwater, out of the drains, and out of the groundwater, and out of your drinking water supply. So that's been a very nice little program. I'm going to let Roger talk for a couple minutes about some of the things that the health department's doing in partnership with us, and then I'll jump back on.
Thank you, Martin. And again, I'll just like to reemphasize something that Martin stated, that, you know, as state agencies, we always collaborate very well, but I think the formation of the Water Quality Rapid Response Team has really emphasized and really has strengthened the collaboration that has gone on between the various agencies in this room, and in particular between the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Conservation. So, in terms of some of the actions that the Department of Health has also been involved in, Martin explained the number of the different sites that have been contaminated with these PFAS compounds throughout New York State. One of the things that the Department of Health has done has taken on biomonitoring, if you will, looking at people's blood levels for these perfluorinated compounds. Pictured on here, some of the sites that Martin had mentioned. To date, we have collected blood levels from over 6,700 people in these communities that have been impacted by these perfluorinated compounds. These perfluorinated compounds are very sort of unique in the sense that they do bind to the blood sera. And while the blood monitoring itself is not going to be able to tell an individual what their potential health effects are, it does provide a sense of exposure. And why this is important is, as Martin had mentioned, one of the proactive steps that we are taking as a state are providing either alternate water or treatment to this water. We will be going back to these communities and looking at the levels of these perfluorinated compounds in the blood of these people again to be able to demonstrate to them that their exposures have ceased, and we'll be starting to see a decrease in the levels in people's blood. Also, one of the proactive steps that we have been taking is looking at advanced treatment technologies. Martin had mentioned that there are a number of emerging contaminants that are being found in our waters, not only here in New York State, but throughout the country. A lot of this has to do with greater analytical technologies that have come about. We're able to actually find these chemicals in our water supply at lower and lower concentrations. And some of these chemical compounds, while they can be treated or removed from our drinking water sources with traditional treatment technologies such as granule activated carbon, which Martin showed you some pictures, some of these emerging contaminants do pose some real challenges to the drinking water industry in terms of how to remove them. So as a proactive step, we here in New York State have been very out in the forefront at looking at advanced treatment technologies. One of these is a treatment technology known as advanced oxidation processes. While not new for remediation, AOP has really never been used on drinking water supplies before. And we here in New York State were one of the first states to actually review and approve the use of AOP treatment here in New York for the treatment of drinking water. We're also partnered with the University at Stony Brook, the Center for Clean Water Technology, to further advance different types of drinking water treatment technologies that will allow us, again, to be proactive here in New York State, to be able to sort of deal with these new emerging contaminants as they come across through our monitoring. And finally, Martin referenced the Drinking Water Quality Council. As part of that $2.5 billion Clean Water Infrastructure Act, there was legislation that was put forth that actually established a Drinking Water Quality Council that would act as an advisory panel to the Department of Health. And the council is made up of 12 members, 8 of which are appointed by the governor. The remaining 4 appointed by both the Senate and the Assembly. The members of this council represent drinking water purveyors throughout New York State, environmental engineers, toxicologists, risk assessors, and a microbiologist. So we have great expertise on this Drinking Water Council that is going to be able to provide advice and recommendations to the department moving forward in terms of what emerging contaminants we believe are unique here to New York State that we might want to have our drinking water systems monitored for. Looking at notification levels. At what levels should we be concerned and start notifying people of the potential of these contaminants in their drinking water? And also making recommendations to the department in terms of what maximum contaminant levels should be established as regulatory limits for some of these chemicals sort of in our drinking water. And to date, the council has met 3 times and will continue to meet moving forward. And we do expect that this is going to be a great new asset, a proactive approach here in New York State to deal with emerging contaminants in our source waters and in our drinking water. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Martin.
Thanks, Roger. I just want to wrap up with a couple of points here that this response is ongoing. It's across the board. It's comprehensive. It pulls in state agencies of every kind. When some of you saw the agenda item today, you might have had some thoughts about how it related to this commission. But the early days in the Hoosick Falls situation, for example, we had virtually every agency in the state helping out. We had our forest rangers providing incident command. We had dishes helping us with bottled water. We had DOT helping us with various aspects. So this has really been a statewide effort, very similar to the efforts that have been going on that you've described here today and some other situations, response to emergencies or flooding and those type of things. You don't often think of water quality as requiring a response like that, but that's the level of effort and resources that have been brought to bear on this problem, and it'll keep going. Again, we're going to continue to work on this, attack it on multiple fronts. We continue to engage the federal government, EPA, Department of Defense, and others to step up and treat this as the national problem that it is and give it the appropriate resources and attention that it deserves. And one final thought is that, obviously we expend state resources, and we're very appreciative of divisional budget, and again, the state legislature and the governor providing us with significant resources here. But as always, we expect the responsible parties and the polluters to eventually pay for this work that we've been conducting. And again, we continue to reach out to those responsible parties, whether it's industry or the military or even the manufacturers of the firefighting foam, as we go forward. So stay tuned on those efforts. So I'll take a few questions if we have time. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Roger, Martin, thank you very much. Does anybody have any final comments or something they want to get out while we're still open? No? Thank you for your patience. Appreciate everybody's participation. That's it. Thank you.